It's been a heavy few weeks to be away from this desk, and almost I would say few weeks to be Congolese. And while I was focused on bringing you the World Cup coverage with the games, the diaspora, the pride of watching the Leopards play knockout rounds football for the first time in the history of this country, the rest of the DRC story, I would say, did not really pause for us. And as a matter of fact, it never does. Kinshasa filed a historic case against Rwanda at the International Court of Justice. A daughter of Patrice Lumumba is essentially fighting for the leadership of the Francophonie against a Rwandan incumbent. Washington sanctioned another Rwandan gold refinery for laundering Congolese mineral. An Ebola outbreak with no approved vaccine spread throughout the same eastern province already broken by war. And at home, in Kinshasa, the government moved a bill throughout parliament that could essentially open the door to a third term for President Tshisekedi. And all of that will trigger the kind of street violence this country has seen before under a different president for the exact same reason. So this is the tension I live in every time I sit down at this desk. Um, Friends of the Congo put together this platform because the world cannot continue to look away or to look at the Congo unless something really forces it to. So, a war, an epidemic, and this summer, a football team. And when the world essentially does look for those 90 minutes at a time, I refuse to let that attention become a substitute for the harder conversations underneath it. The DR Congo, the Leopard, gave us joy this summer. They gave me joy to be able to attend those games and watch them. They did not give us a pass for scrutiny, I would say, of our own institutions and our own internal problems. And they certainly did not give Rwanda a pass either. So today is a different kind of show. No guest, just me walking you through essentially everything you may have missed in full, giving you the complete and honest accounts of what this World Cup run actually meant. And before we close, telling you what I'm building next on this platform, because I don't intend to be the only voice here for very much longer. And that's the entire point of Friends of the Congo, to be able to amplify the voice of countless Congolese folks who are waiting, ready in line, are waiting in line to be heard. Their stories are waiting to be amplified. So this is Congo Unfiltered, and nothing get past tonight, today, wherever you're watching. Not Kigali, not Kinshasa, not the FIFA, not Washington. So let's get into it. So before I move into the news, I need to correct. I will say I need to mention something that's as Friends of the Congo we celebrate. So on July 2nd, Friends of the Congo marks what would have been Patrice Lumumba's 101st birthday. And I want to take a few minutes in this episode on this show to do something I rarely has a space for, not to relegate his assassination, not to essentially uh, uh, relegate the Belgium and American roles in it, but to simply talk about who this man was. And before the world came to know him as the very first elected official of the Congo, the prime minister of the Congo, the DR Congo, because I think we do him a disservice when we only ever discuss him as a martyr. So he was a man first with a full life before that title, before being a prime minister. And that life, to me personally, deserves to be told entirely. And Patrice Lumumba was essentially born on July 2nd, 1925, in the village of Onalua in Sankuru district in the Kasai province. He's a Tetela man. He was raised across Catholic, Protestant, and Jesuit mission schools in a very colonial education system explicitly designed to produce clerics and catechists, not necessarily future heads of state. So he never received a university education, and everything that followed what substantially was essentially self-taught, right? He built that through an almost obsessive habit of reading everything he could access. So before politics, Patrice Lumumba built a working life entirely within the boundary, the colonial system permitted for a Congolese man of ambition, right? He worked as a postal clerk in Stanleyville, the city we now called Kisangani, and because and became an active member of what we call the Evolué class. It is essentially the small circle of Congolese permitted limited social advancement under the Belgian rule, provided they assimilated to Belgian cultural norms, right? So Patrice Lumumba wrote, he published poetry and political essays in Congolese newspapers frequently under pseudonyms, and arguing even then for a Congolese identity that didn't require begging for Belgian approval. So he was, by every account, a gift to the Congolese people. He was a gifted speaker and a restless intellectual long before he even held any office. He later moved to Leopoldville, which is Kinshasa today, and he worked as an accountant and a beer salesman for the Polo Brewery, all while he was deepening his involvement in trade unionism and the associational life that colonial authorities tolerated as long as it stayed short, outright political organization. So in 1955, essentially, Belgium owns Belgian-owned King Baudouin. He toured the Congo, and Lumumba was among the Evolué, right, who addressed him directly, evidence essentially of how, even within a system built to contain him, he was already recognized as a voice worth watching. Then what happened is that in 1956 came his first serious collision with colonial power. Belgian authorities arrested him on charges of embezzling postal funds, and he was imprisoned. He was convicted. He was imprisoned. To this day, I would say historians widely regard that prosecution as a political motivated attempt to discredit a rising national voice rather than genuine financial crime. And even when it comes to that embezzlement case, Patrice Lumumba was arguing that the Congolese people didn't have to pay taxes because of how the colonial power at the time were treating the people. That why do we already making Congolese people already earning less when it comes to money? Why should we continue to pay taxes to those white men, to those people who came to plunder, who came to essentially torture us, oppress us? So he refused to pay taxes. He refused, and he was encouraging people to do the same, right? So you gonna see essentially a pattern, colonial and post-colonial African leaders that would face again and again across this continent the same judgment, right? Being sentenced, being put in jail. So for Patrice Lumumba, though, that did not silence him. And if anything, I would say prison even hardened him. He hardened his political clarity. So the turning point came in December of 1958 when he traveled to Accra, Ghana, for a Common Nkrumah All African Peoples Conference. And that was his first direct, I would say, exposure to the wider Pan-Africanist movement sweeping the entire continent at that time. So he returned from Accra transformed, co-founding the Mouvement National Congolais that October, and from that point forward became one of the most uncompromising voices, demanding essentially full and immediate independence, not the gradual, decades long timeline Belgium had quietly assumed it could dictate. I think there was an 82 years plan to hand over Congo to the Congolese people. So colonial authorities arrested him again in October 1959, and that was following the riots in Stanleyville, and sentenced him to prison once more. He was released only under international pressure so that he could attend the Brussels Round Table conference in early 1960. So the negotiations that would set the actual date of Congolese independence. 5 months later, on June 30th, 1960, he stood before King Baudouin himself, the King Baudouin of Belgium, and delivered an Independence Day address that refused the polite, grateful script, I would say, colonial powers expected, naming the beating, the forced labor, and the humiliation of 80 years of Belgian rules, and even mentioning the racism. And he said all of that directly with no shame, with no filter. So he did that in the king's own presence. So that is the man that Friends of the Congo honored this month, 2 days ago, on his birthday, not only as a national hero, not only as a martyr of January 1961, but the postal clerk as well, the poet, the beer company accountant, the prisoner, twice over before he ever had power, who built himself into a nationalist, I would say, because nationalist seems to be kind of like the word that the colonizer don't like to hear. But I'm going to use that word because it's called unfiltered. He built himself into a nationalist leader almost entirely through his own will against the system engineered to prevent exactly that outcome. And I really wanted to tell that story, you know. I wanted that story, the story of Patrice Lumumba, to be told properly once on this program, talk about the man before he even achieve power. The next segment is essentially because I've been myself away, like I mentioned, for a few weeks in the midst of the World Cup a journey supporting the Leopard, and that's why I'm wearing the jersey today. And I will be wearing the Congolese jersey throughout the entire month until the essentially until the World Cup is over. But while I was doing that, a lot of things were happening. A lot. Um, 8 stories that I will be sharing with you. I've organized them roughly, I would say, by domain: international law, diplomacy, sanctions, public health, because we're still in the midst of an Ebola outbreak, and of course, domestic politics. But I want you to listen, I would say, um, to the thread connecting all 8, because it is the same thread running through the tributes I just gave you. Sovereignty contested simultaneously from outside our borders and from within our own institutions. Lumumba, talking about Lumumba, understood that fight before any of us were even born. So I want to begin with that. I want to begin with Kinshasa, the government of Kinshasa, essentially bringing to the International Court of Justice the government of Rwanda. So that happened on June 26th, I believe. The Congolese government filed an application against Rwanda at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. And if you're following us on Instagram right now, there should be a post right now that is out for you to be able to check after this live, and for you to also share and repost and comment. And I would say that this is not a show. I'm gonna hope that it's not a show that the government of Kinshasa put. It is essentially a government asking the United Nations principal judicial organ to hold Rwanda directly responsible for 3 decades of alleged massacres, extrajudicial killings, torture, sexual violence, and forced displacement in the East. And that covered, so they filed this covering the period from 1996 to the present day. And that time frame, y'all, spans essentially the First and Second Congo War, the rise of the M23 in 2012, and the ongoing occupation of Goma and Bukavu today. So what makes this filing different, right, from the last 2 attempts is the legal architecture behind it. And yes, there have been 2 attempts already. And in 2001, we withdrew a case at the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. In 2006, a filing was dismissed outright because Rwanda had never recognized the court's general jurisdiction. But I think that this time Congolese authorities anchored the claim in specific multilateral treaties. We have the 1948 Genocide Convention, the 1984 Convention Against Torture, and we also have the Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. I think it's called CEDAW. And that is really the deliberate strategy to establish jurisdiction through treaty obligations Rwanda has already signed, rather than requiring Kigali blanket consent to be sued. And another thing to also mention is also what we call jurisprudence, because we'll remember that South Africa also took another country to the ICJ for genocide, and that's Israel. And Israel is also, just like Rwanda, essentially does not recognize the ICJ, I believe, and I might be wrong. And just like it was the case for Russia, when there is also a case against Russia right now. But the fact that they were able to still say that that the ICJ still has jurisdiction over Palestine, therefore the state of Israel should also can be taken to court. And I think that the same jurisprudence that also is playing today, because we can also have the same arguments when it comes to the Congo, but also that we can see that other nations are taking nations that are not part of the treaty, that are not recognizing the ICJ jurisdiction, but it is happening, it's being done. So why can't it be done for the Congo, right? So this filing, though, does not stand alone, and he also builds on a case already before the African Court on Human and People's Rights, and I think it's the first interstate case in that court's history ruled admissible in June of last year, in 2026 of last year. And a parallel case before the East African Court of Justice in Kinshasa is now essentially running a coordinated legal offensive across 3 international tribunals simultaneously, precisely because he cannot defeat M23 on the battlefields. And I've talked about this situation, about how militarily Congo seems to be struggling for multiple reasons, structural reason militarily, um, but also because of how the Rwandan military is really well oiled, financed, funded, equipped, right? And also how, on the contrary, with the corruption in the Congo that keeps hiring mercenaries, or that was hiring mercenaries, pay them 5,000, 3,000 for each soldier, when the Congolese soldier, military person, were paid less than $100 before recently the government increasing it to 500 in the midst of the war. So the Congo cannot defeat the M23 on the battlefields. That's a fact. The rebels still hold Goma and Bukavu, Bunagana, and hundreds territories. So they still control significant territory across North and South Kivu. And according to UN expert, excuse me, they still receive direct support from thousands of Rwanda Defense Force personnel. And I actually got a text message from Sephora SRK News that I salute, asking if I had more information about the UN report that just came out. I haven't had the time to read that report, but once I do, I'll be able to break it down for y'all, so that we can dive into what the United Nations once again are saying about the aggression, about Rwanda, about the Congo, about the refugees crisis, about the humanitarian crisis. But what we can get out of it is what we have been saying for years, for months, is that the Rwanda government continue to provide direct support to M23. So I want to talk about what this case at the ICJ actually means, because that case actually names, because the specifics matter here, that more than, I would say, the headline. Because when you file a document essentially accusing a country like Rwanda of and the proxies, right, of committing war crimes, or of occupying a country, that filing mentions specifically the M23. It mentions specifically the AFC. It mentioned alliance, right? Because again, it's from 1996 all the way to 2000, all the way to today. Okay, Rocky Kabea just mentioned something. I would come down to that. Let me just put what he says. You gather the facts, connect the dots. That is so true. There are many facts about what's happening in the Congo right now. Many, however, how you connect the dots matter, because there are many pictures that can be drawn. You claim that you're speaking for those without voice in the 21st century, the era of social media. Let me tell you something interesting about numbers and the interpretation. I'm on your mailing list, so when you do your pitch to whoever, can't read, I think it was 2. But anyways, that was a long comment. Thanks, Rocky Kabea, for what you were trying to tell. So anyways, so they were naming a bunch of organizations, a bunch of, I would say, armed groups that are involved in the occupation, that have been involved in a massacre. Like we talking about unlawful military operation targeting Hutu refugees who fled into the then Zaire after the 1994 genocide, alongside 6 other Congolese ethnic groups explicitly cited in Kinshasa filing: the Nyundu, the Bembe, the Lega, the Nande, the Hunde, and the Bashi. And I think this is really significant because it moves the legal argument beyond a simple narrative of Rwanda self-defense against the FDLR. And that's the position and that's the position of Kigali, and that's the position that Kigali has maintained since the 1990s, and toward a documented pattern of violence, I would say, against multiple Congolese communities who multiple communities who had absolutely nothing to do with the 1994 genocide of its aftermath. And it's actually funny sometimes when you hear that narrative coming from Kigali, they tend to be talking about FDLR as those who committed genocide in 1994, which I have debunked in this show. In the FDLR was created in 2002, right? That's years before the 1994 genocide. But for some reason, they keep mixing those, which I think is really dishonest and actually speaks about the motive of using that. So Rwanda, the Rwanda government, the Rwanda's position, for the record though, has not changed, like I mentioned, and it continue to uh, accuse Kinshasa of arming and harboring the FDLR, a claim that the DRC government rejects. But I also have to say, in all fairness, that those are also documented by the United Nations that are saying that yes, there are elements in the Congolese army that are in talks with the FDLR, that are essentially funding the FDLR, fighting along them, and then the reason why I am mentioning that is because I cannot just truncate what the UN group of experts are saying in favor of the Congolese government, or in favor of the Congolese people of the country of the Congo, blaming and pointing pointing Rwanda on the aggression that they're doing, while at the same time trying to erase part of the story that somehow incriminates the Congolese government. Because if the report says that Rwanda is occupying the Congo, the same report also says that there is um, a collaboration between the FDLR and the Kinshasa government that the Kinshasa government needs to address and need to actually, I would say, even seize any sort of like support. That's just my personal opinion. But uh, what has changed is the weight, I would say, of independent verification, and UN experts and the Western government, they have for years now sided substantially with the Congolese accounts of Rwanda supporting of M23. And even Rwanda themselves, uh, on records, when they were testifying, I think it was at the Congress, the Rwandan ambassador was able to uh, put out there that yes, we are supporting M23. We're not hiding anymore, but these are the reasons why we're supporting it. So that convergence, I'll say, of independent, non-Congolese sources, and even the Congolese, even the Rwandan government itself, is precisely what gives this filing, I would say, more credibility than either of our two previous attempts. So the timeline here, and I want to manage expectations honestly here, because frankly, I've seen too much premature celebration around international legal filings in our community before. So the ICJ proceedings of this complexity involving jurisdictional objections, evidentiary hearings, and merits arguments routinely take years, and I'm not even exaggerating, years, sometimes a full decade before a final judgment can even be given. So the more immediate opportunity is a request for provisional measures. Um, and I can explain that. So there is like an emergency order the court can issue relatively quickly, just like we've seen in the case of Palestine or Gaza and Israel, like an emergency order that the court can issue quickly, compelling a state to halt a specific conduct while the broader case proceeds. And we've seen the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Rwanda essentially saying that, hey, we're not gonna remove our troops because essentially the Washington Accord, which by the way, June 27th was the first year anniversary of that accord, peace accord, was forcing the Rwandan government to remove the troops, even though the terminology was not what we would have wished. And we talked about that on this show on Congo Unfiltered, Friends of the Congo, how the accord talks about defensive measure when you have 10,000s Rwandan troops on Congolese soil, deep into Congolese in Congolese territory. But he was saying that we're not going to remove those troops because that accord is also compelling the DRC. So an emergency order by the ICJ could essentially force the Rwandan government to do that specifically. Whatever military action that you are currently using or doing to justify the occupation of Goma, the occupation of Bukavu, the occupation of Bunagana, and 100 other Congolese territories, that need to stop, right? And Kinshasa's legal team, I would say, it would be wise to pursue that route in parallel. Like they need to actually be able to not wait for the final decisions, but say, hey, we need that provisional measure, even short of a final judgment. That provisional measure would carry, I would say, a real diplomatic weight in the interim. And I will be tracking myself whether that request becomes a reality, materializes. But I would say that I would say what I always say on this show on Congo Unfiltered, that courts do not stop bullets, and we have seen that again in the case of Gaza and Palestine. But what courts do, though, whether it's court's order, whatever is proceeding, they build a record. Courts build a legal records of exactly what was done and by whom and when. And a record is what we hand to history when the guns eventually go quiet. Whether that happens next year or in another 50 years, and I hope it doesn't take that long. What did the Congolese people do to stop the genocide in the Congo? What did the Congolese people do to liberate the Congo? What did the government, the Congolese government, do to ensure that Congolese folks are free of occupation? What did the international community do at that time when we had 7 million Congolese folks displaced due to the war? What was the United Nations doing? What was the United States doing? What was France doing? This is exactly what the courts, like what courts do, builds a record, a tracking record, an archive to be able to provide account of what happened exactly during that time. So while we're talking about the occupation, the conflict between Rwanda and Congo, I feel like there is another conflict that is happening, but in a different arena. Um, and that's probably a story that I haven't shared on this show. It is a story that has not gotten nearly, I would say, enough attention within our own community. Juliana Amato Lumumba is the daughter of Patrice Lumumba, our founding prime minister, the very first one elected. She is Kinshasa's official candidate for to Secretary General of the Organization International. I was going to say that in English, but Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie. Don't ask me to translate that. Her opponent is essentially seeking a third term of her own. And the opponent is Rwanda's Louise Mushikiwabo. And she has been there for years now. And I always ask myself a question because the official language of Rwanda is English. They speak English. They speak in Rwanda. They speak other language there. But the official language of Rwanda is English. My brain cannot comprehend how come Rwanda, who's also part of the Commonwealth, by the way, and there were, I think, from quite a while, Rwanda was leading the Commonwealth. Like President Kagame was the president of the Commonwealth. So he's in the Commonwealth. Rwanda is in Commonwealth. But how come they are also in Francophonie? That is supposed to be as French-speaking organizations. Meanwhile, the Congo, which is the #1 country that has the highest number of French speakers, does not have a seat, does not have the leadership. Obviously, it's political. So I'm quite interested to see what that will become, right? Because I want people to be able to also sit with the fact that of what such a moment will mean for the Congo, or even for the situation for the Great Lake region. So you have the two nations locked in the most consequential armed conflicts on the African continent right now. They are simultaneously locked in a parallel context for leadership of the largest French-speaking institution in the world. Congo, as the largest Francophone country on earth by population, more than 100 million people, more than France itself, more than Belgium. And that cannot be a simple footnote. And I feel like this is sovereignty and soft power being contested in a different arena. And the vote happens this November, I believe, at the next summit. So Madame Lumumba has been careful publicly, and I understand the diplomatic necessity of this, not to frame the race as a Kinshasa versus Kigali conflict, right? Not trying to wrap it up around the occupation. I completely understand that. And in her hearing before Francophonie foreign ministers in Paris on July 1st, she spoke instead of a Francophonie des peuples, Francophonie of people, focused on youth and digital sovereignty, economic cooperation, and what she calls narrative sovereignty, the right of African societies to define and tell their own stories rather than have them defined from outside. And I'm not bound by the same diplomatic caution, and neither are you. And this is Congo Unfiltered. And every Congolese person watching this race should understand exactly what is at stake if a Lumumba stands where a Kigali aligned Secretary General currently sits. Let me drink water because this is very important. This is a contest over whose voice narrates the Francophone world for the next several years. And I intend to keep this story on our radar all the way to November, right? So consider the symbolism Kinshasa is deliberately wielding here. Government spokesman Patrick Muyaya has been explicit that the DRC candidacy rests on more than sentiment. And again, it is the largest Francophone country on earth by population, home to the largest Francophone metropolitan area anywhere in the world, asserting that it is time for the Congolese voice to be heard at the top of an institution he has never led. And I think Madame Lumumba, Madame Lumumba's own biography does real political work here that no other candidates can replicate. She has campaigned in Ottawa and Quebec, courting Canadian support. She has invoked her father's enduring legacy among the leaders of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, nations that have exited the Francophonie in protest of what they see as a neo-colonial institutional structure. And she has also positioned herself as a uniquely capable of drawing them back in, precisely because, in her own word, her father remains a political and diplomatic icon. None of this, though, guarantees her victory, I would say, in um, this November, this fall. Incumbency, I would say, carries real institutional weight. When you have been leading and you are running again, it's very hard for you to lose in any type of election because you have the power, you have all the media spotlight. So, Secretary General Mushikiwabo of Rwanda has held this post since 2019. But I want this community watching closely because a Congolese win here will be a genuine soft power again, soft power victory achieved through legitimate institutional means, and exactly the kind of sovereignty assertion this show has always argued for, distinct from a complementary to the harder legal battles being fought at the ICJ, right? That was the second point. The third point is still within that, I would say, bubble of fight between Congo and Rwanda, the occupation of Congolese territories. The Washington government, Donald Trump administration, has sanctioned another Rwandan gold pipeline. The U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Asset Control sanctioned the Gasabo Gold refinery in Kigali on June 25th. And I think, along with his chairman, Jean-Malik Kalima, he's the general manager of Bosco Kayobotsi, and three linked mining companies, the Bugambira Mines, Wolfram Mining and Processing, and the Wikwavu Mining Corporation. And if you read the allegation, they're saying that the network laundered essentially gold smuggled out of M23 occupied South Kivu and moved under the direct escort of Rwandan Defense Force soldiers and M23's fighters across the border to Kigali. Very important. So Treasury owned statement puts the figure at a minimum of 60 kilograms of gold worth millions of dollars moved through this single pipeline in the early months of this year alone, right? This is a general cost in real time, genocide for economic gain, playing out exactly as the Congolese Action Youth Platform has been documented, has been talking about for years. A war that is, at its structural core, a resource extraction operation wearing the mask of an ethnic security conflict. This is why, personally, I've refused to even talk about tribes, to even talk about ethnicity whenever we talk about death in the Congo, whenever we're talking about the war in the Congo. Because we cannot reduce 450 tribes, we cannot reduce what we know to be a resource extraction operation wearing operation, I would say, a strategy as a tribal or ethnic conflict. So, Treasury's own statement referenced the March 2026 collapse of a mine shaft at the M23 controlled Rubaya coltan mine, which killed over 200 people, including children. That is for you the human cost. Sitting essentially underneath every kilogram of gold that moves through that pipeline. And Rubaya, I remind you, is a site producing an estimated 15% of the world's tantalum supply, and a site the Congolese government itself has listed among the strategic assets on offer to the American mining interest. So this is now at least the fourth round of U.S. sanctions tied to these conflicts since the Washington Accord were signed in December. Following the Rwanda Defense Force designation in March and further action in April and June. Sanctions are nothing, and I'm not saying that at Friends of the Congo we support sanctions. Sanctions are not victory. The gold is still moving. The mine is still killing people. They're still operating, and we also have seen sanction. What happened to the sanction against Don Gertler? What happened to those sanctions? What happened to the sanction against Kone Nanga? Sanction 2019, 2021, he creates the AFC. And now he's occupying Goma and Bukavu with his allies from Rwanda, from Kigali. So I want to be equally clear about the other half of this story, which we will return to shortly. The same American minerals architecture funding the accountability is also simultaneously propping up a Congolese president who is maneuvering toward a third term. And I know I'm going to get a lot of hate right now for saying that, but I cannot talk about international politics without talking about what's happening inside. I cannot. I just can't be dishonest. And I want to put a number in front of you that puts Rwanda's gold trade in a proper perspective. By its own reporting, Rwanda, a country with minimal, and I'm not saying that he has none, minimal domestic gold production of his own, exported an estimated 19.4 tons of gold in 2024. That is worth approximately $1.5 billion. $1.5 billion. Regional analysts have noted that international attention on these conflicts has historically centered on coltan and tantalum, but gold has really, how can I say that, quietly become the more lucrative commodity moving through this exact laundering architecture. The European Union had already sanctioned the same Gasabo refinery previously for exactly the same conduct. Meaning here that Washington's action this time is not discovery, it's nothing new. It is an escalation of an already documented pattern that neither sanctions regime has yet been able to fully interrupt. And this is precisely the fourth pillar argument that I've made on this program before and even in my tweets. The American strategic competition with China over critical mineral supply chains has turned the DRC's mineral into a genuine dimension of US grand strategy. And that reality, y'all, that reality can cut essentially two ways. It can produce real accountability tools like these sanctions. I beg to disagree, but could be an option. Or it can produce a transactional relationship where Washington's appetites for cobalt, copper, tantalum, makes it reluctant to apply equivalent pressure on the Congolese government, whose own conducts, as we are about to discuss, raises its own serious concern. And I really want to place this conversation, this debate within a longer arc of history because Genocost, genocide for economic gain, cannot be a framework that we are um, ignoring. As a matter of fact, it is not a framework invented in a vacuum. It names a continuity. This is the same territory where under King Leopold II of Congo Free States, robber quotas were enforced through mutilation and mass killing, hands being cut off, where colonial extraction operated on the explicit premise that Congolese life was cheaper than the resource being taken from Congolese soil, essentially. The names, again, have changed. The commodity have changed. The commodity has changed from rubber and ivory to coltan and gold. The mechanism, like the violence organized around resource extraction with the international markets absorbing the output while looking away from the human cost of production, that has not changed. That has not changed nearly enough, I would say. So when you have young Congolese gathering in London in 2013, 20, even before that, 2010, and then 2013, coined the term genocost, they were naming a structural continuity that predates M23, predates Rwanda's involvement, and will outlast, I would say, both if the underlying economic incentives are never dismantled. And that's it essentially for the conflict with Rwanda. And that brings us to the fourth, I would say, crisis of information happening in the Congo is the Ebola outbreak that you may heard, but you may not have been tracking. And I think it's important to also mention that because while much of the world was watching the World Cup highlights, the Ebola virus, with no approved vaccine and a historical fatality rate between 25 and 50%, has been essentially spreading through Ituri, North Kivu since mid-May. And that's why at France with Congo, we send folks on the ground to be able to cover this live in real time so we can get information directly from the ground. And I want to thank brother Akili Mali, who is working really hard right now, trying to bring us the information that we need for that. The World Health Organization declared that this is a public health emergency, that Ebola is a public health emergency of international concern. They declared that on May 17th. As the most recent situation report, we are looking at over 1,400 confirmed cases and more than 400 deaths in the DRC alone. And it is the 17th Ebola outbreak in the DRC history and the third involving the Bundibugyo strain specifically, which mattered because here the existing Ebola vaccine developed for the Zaire strain is not approved for use against this variant. So containment here falls back entirely on classic public health measures, contact tracing, safe burials of victims, isolation, quarantine, if you like, and community trust. Community trust in provinces where insecurity, displacement, and mining-related population movement make every one of those measures harder to even execute. 96 healthcare workers have been affected. 96. The virus has already reached Kisangani, carried over 180 miles by motorcycle in the body of a woman who died before diagnosis. So this outbreak is unfolding in the exact provinces already devastated by the M23 occupation, and also with those who are affiliated with ISIS. So it is not a coincidence. I will let pass without comment, right? That war does not just kill directly. It dismantles the health infrastructure that would otherwise contain outbreak like this one. And the people paying that price are, once again, civilians who are already carrying the weight of a conflict that did not start. So I want to acknowledge something Juliana Lumumba said publicly on this exact topic during her Francophonie's campaign. She noted that this is the DRC 17th Ebola outbreak, and that our country, the DRC, through the work of the National Institute of Biomedical Research and researchers like Professor Jean-Jacques Uyembe, that I salute, has developed some of the most experienced epidemic response expertise on the continent. That expertise is real, and I think it deserves recognition, even in the middle of a crisis this severe. But I'm going to be frank with you, because expertise built through repeated, I would say, tragedy is not and cannot be the same, is not and cannot be the same as is not and cannot be the same as a healthcare system or a health system that should essentially or should have faced a 17 outbreak in the first place. That shouldn't happen. The Congolese people shouldn't have to go to a 17th outbreak for them to be resilient. I don't think it's fair to the Congolese people. Institutional competence born from repetition is not a substitute for the underlying insecurity and underinvestment that makes each new outbreak possible. The international response has been swift on the restriction side, I would say, if slower on the treatment side. The United States began restricting entry for travelers who had recently been in the DRC, Uganda, South Sudan in mid-May, and since late May has limited entry for those countries to US citizens and nationals only. And that's why it was almost impossible to have supporters of the DR Congo coming from the Congo to attend any games. Spain went so far that it has to cancel a scheduled football friendly between Chile and the DRC in early June, citing health risk concerns. I understand the public health logic behind travel restriction, but I want us to notice the pattern here, that the world here moves quickly to wall itself off from Congolese bodies during an epidemic, and moves far more slowly to fund the vaccine research that would, I would say, end these outbreaks at their source. There's another story that I'm going to share with you. It was shared with me with a friend. She's a French citizen living in Belgium for years, originally from the Congo. She hasn't been in the Congo in years, probably almost a decade. She was applying, or she was trying to go to Canada to see her family. I think one of her cousin was graduating, and the Canadian government refused to issue her a visa or denied her entry. The official reason is that because of Ebola, when she asked. But then she had to say, no, that cannot be possible because one, I have a French passport. Yeah, but you're originally from the Congo. Yeah, but I have not been in the Congo in the decades. And then they told her that it was a mistake, they were going to fix her case. Until today, she never received that visa. She was never granted entry. I I think there is low-key racism in those restrictions, which is interesting because they are quick to allow Congolese minerals in Western capitals, but they're also quick to deny entries to the people that are fleeing the war, to the people that are simply trying to attend a football game to support the team, to deny entry to folks who want to come and visit. I don't know what to make of it. So back to what I was saying, that the coalition here for the epidemic preparedness innovations only announced fast-tracked funding for three Bundibugyo vaccine candidates on June 1st, more than 2 weeks after the PHEIC, so the PHEIC declaration, in an outbreak that is, by some measures, already the worst first month case total of any Ebola outbreak on record. So when that was happening, unfortunately, even before DR Congo first game on June 17th, 2026, the Congolese president, unfortunately, had not made any statements publicly televised on the Ebola situation, trying to reassure the Congolese people. Instead, he decided to bring an entire country into a third-term fight. And this is why in this show, I will not look away from it. Because that story, I think, I consider the most consequential of everything on this list because it concerns accountability at home. And we are friends of the Congo. And this show has never treated that as a lesser priority than accountability abroad. In May, the President Tshisekedi told the Congolese and international media that he would accept a third term if the people want it. And by saying that, he was essentially floating a constitutional referendum as the mechanism. Congo's constitution currently bars any revision of presidential term limits. Full stop, no discussion. I don't need to be a lawyer. I don't need to be a constitutionalist. I don't need to be a judge. I just need to not being stupid and know how to read. And I read the Constitution. But the bill his ruling majority pushed through the parliament works around that by permitting a constitutional overhaul through a referendum in the event of a vaguely defined major dysfunction of state institution. Both chambers passed it. The Senate passed it. The National Assembly passed it without, I would say, opposition lawmakers present who had essentially like walked out because I think they're like, what, less than 10%? So on June 12, a rally against this bill in Kinshasa turned violent, and we briefly covered that, and I even tweeted about it. Opposition leaders, including Martin Fayulu, Jean-Marc Kaboun, Delice Sanga, were injured. Fayou has directly accused the president of associating what's known as the Force of Progress, an informal youth wing of the ruling coalition, increasingly described by regional reporting as a lawless militia with police action against unarmed demonstrators. The opposition C64 coalition, that's the name that they gave themselves, always I feel like Congolese has a really strange inspiration to come up with names. But C64, talking about this, the Article 64 that talks about defending the Constitution coalition. So C64. So the Article 64 coalition for the defense of constitutional order has called essentially President Tshisekedi's position a betrayal of his oath of office and has announced further march. I think they were supposed to be in July 8th, but that has been postponed because they're supposed to go to Bujumbura in Uganda. Maybe that's Burundi. Bujumbura for sure. I think it's in Burundi. Bujumbura in Burundi to talk. Not sure what they're going to talk about. But Martin Fayulu on the space, I think it was yesterday, he was saying that they're aware of the acquaintance of President of Burundi and President Tshisekedi. They get along, they're buddies, but they are going to him in his quality of the president of the African Union. So they postponed the march that was supposed to take place at the Presidential Palace, demanding the resignation of President Tshisekedi. And I need you to hear the historical echo in this because it is not subtle. This is precisely the type of maneuver Joseph Kabila attempted in 2016. Delay elections, cite instability, revise a rule to extend a mandate. Kabila was sentenced to death in absentia last September for treason and war crime, convicted of colluding with the very M23 rebels now occupying the eastern part of the Congo, the Kivu, the Goma, Bukavu. And here we are watching his successor invoke the same conflict Kabila was convicted of enabling as the justification for staying in power past his own constitutional limit. So President Tshisekedi has also tied this constitutional maneuvering to the American Minerals Partnership directly, arguing that reforms were demanded by Washington, that the justice sector cannot be, that the Congolese government cannot implement the accord or those minerals reforms, I guess, without amending the Constitution. He said that. But I also want you to notice how convenient that linkage is. The same strategic partnership agreement that grants American companies preferential access to Congolese cobalt, copper, tantalum is now being cited as a justification for constitutional change that would, above all else, extend the incumbent president on power. Michel Gavin at the Council of Foreign Relations put it plainly. Washington's transactional embrace of Kinshasa is being read by ordinary Congolese people as tacit political cover for a leader with, in her words, a dubious mandate. End of quote. This quote right there is why I hold both governments to account simultaneously, and I always will. That Rwanda's occupation of the East is a crime killing Congolese people from the outside. And a Congolese president using that same crime as a pretext to entrench himself in power restraining or restricting the freedom of the people is a betrayal of the people he claims to be protecting. Accountability here is not a limited resources, and I've said that multiple times. We don't run out of accountability. And I refuse the false choice between condemning Kigali and condemning Kinshasa. Speaking about the aggression while closing my eyes about the oppression in Kinshasa, I refuse. Both demands stand at the same time without contradiction. Without contradiction. And let's be precise about the legal mechanics, because the government's defender will tell you this is simply about judicial reform demanded by Washington. Congo's constitution does not merely limit president to two terms. It explicitly places that term limit provision beyond the reach of any revision whatsoever. The new bill does not touch that clause directly. Instead, it creates a referendum pathway triggered by a major dysfunction of a state's institution. This is the undefined elastic standard, I would say, that the sitting government itself gets to invoke. And critically, any newly adopted constitution would reset the clock entirely. Entirely. I'm not even going to lie to you. Allowing President Tshisekedi to serve what would functionally be a third term as though it were his first under the new charter. And that is not technicality. That is the entire design of the bill. For those who read it, and the Senate President, Jean-Michel Sama Lukonde, former Prime Minister of the Congo as well, he defended the vote as giving Congolese people a framework to, in his own word, exercise their sovereignty. And he said, exercise their sovereignty through a referendum. I only have one question to ask him directly. If he ever encountered this video, or if he speaks English, or if somebody will dare to even translate in French for him, I'll ask him a simple question. Sovereignty for whom? I'll ask him another question. Sovereignty exercised under what condition? Because the opposition was not even present at the chamber, in the chamber for the votes. They walked out. And when the very war cited as justification for constitutional change is the same war this government has failed to resolve after years in office, I don't know, man. And you have the Catholic Church, notably, has emerged as one of the strongest, I would say, institutional opponent of this change. Significant in a country where the church carries a real moral authority. And reporting here suggests that the president has been cultivating relationship with Protestant pastors as a counterweight to that opposition. So I really invite y'all to watch closely, attentively, that religious dimension closely in the month ahead. What would happen? What would the dynamic be? So the opposition here has already tested the water when it comes to mass mobilization back in early June when calls circulated for so-called dead city protest. Obviously, you had the government saying that everything was fine, but if it didn't work, you wouldn't go on air and try to justify that. So that tactic was like a way for the opposition to prove that it can still shut down economic activity in Kinshasa. But I don't even think that that's going to be enough and actually fair, that the more we're going into this slope, the deadly it will become. The deadly this will become. So then what happens to the victims? What happened to the people? The seventh point, and not least, it's Kinshasa's UN Security Council presidency. And there is a resolution on our minerals. The DRC holds the rotating presidency at the UN Security Council this month. And Kinshasa is using it deliberately, which is brilliant. So you see, I don't always criticize the government. Sometimes I give compliments. So President Tshisekedi here is expected to personally chair a high-level open debate this month on what's being called natural resource governance, the foundation of peace, security, and prosperity, with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres among the briefers. A high-level meeting. The stated goal is very ambitious, I'm not gonna lie. A first of its kind Security Council resolution, essentially establishing global standards for the governance of mineral resources, explicitly framed around the accusation that Rwanda has spent decades pilfering its neighbors' natural wealth. So context matters here. It matters a lot. This follows a precedent set just months ago when the United States used its own Security Council presidency in March to convene a briefing specifically on energy, critical minerals, and security, which is a sign of just how central mineral geopolitics has become to council business generally, not only the specific, not only to our specific conflict, to the Congolese conflict, but to the members, to folks, to people doing business. So council members now appear broadly sympathetic to the general principle that illegal resource exploitation fuels conflict financing for armed groups across multiple settings, not only in the DRC. So whether that particular sympathy translate into a genuine, I would say, binding resolution rather than another presidential statement, I think that is the open question. That is a question that everybody can ask, and we're just gonna keep it there. But I would like to personally see whether this translate into a binding council product, or whether it becomes another presidential statement that generates headlines, essentially without teeth or consequence. The Security Council has explored the resource conflict link before, thematically and country specifically, without producing durable change on the ground in the Congo. And the government of Kinshasa here is betting that a formal global framework, right, one explicitly invoking the DRC's experience, could succeed where individual sanction rounds have not. And I'm very excited about that because I'll be watching this open debate. I'll be watching that debate closely. If possible, I would stream it with y'all, or I can just come back and report back on exactly what, if anything, the council actually adopts. And then the last point is the lithium royalty rise as Manono comes online. Kinshasa has raised the royalty on lithium and other strategic minerals to 10%, time to coincide with Zijin mining bringing the massive Maneno deposit into production. And for those who don't know, Maneno is one of the largest hard rock lithium deposits on Earth, sitting in Tanganyika province, which is like really far from the immediate M23 front lines, but squarely inside the same national resource architecture we have discussed in this show. So as global demand for the lithium accelerates with the electric vehicle transition, I think that this deposit will become an increasingly significant piece of Congo's overall mineral profile. So the question I intend to keep asking is simple. Does a royalty increase on paper actually translate into revenue that reaches Congolese communities living around Manono? Or does it simply reroute through the same extraction architecture that has defined this country's relationship to its own mineral wealth for over a century? A royalty rate is only as meaningful as the transparency mechanism that verify it. It verifies if it's actually collected, if it's actually deposited into public accounts, actually spent on public goods rather than absorbed into the same patronage network they show as documented around other mineral revenue streams. And I will not treat the percentage increase as a victory until independent auditing confirms where that money actually goes. Because we know the way the Congolese governments manage resources, public funds. And for this last segment, because I've been speaking for a long time now, I want to talk briefly about the historic run of the Leopards during this World Cup. But before I move to the pitch, I want to name explicitly why I also refuse to treat that news recap that I just provided to you and this football recap as two separate shows stitched together. Every story I just walked you through, the ICJ filing, the Lumumba candidacy, the sanction, the outbreak, the third term, is at its core a story about who gets to define the Congo's narrative on the world stage and on what terms. This World Cup run was the one moment this year when that narrative was briefly defined by us, by our players, on a pitch, on our merit, on our own merit, with no government minister spin or no foreign courts ruling required to make the case. That is exactly why I refuse to let this segment be treated as lighter or less serious than everything that came before it. Now to the story that gave us something to feel proud of without asterisks or punctuation. Let me walk you through exactly what happened match by match, because the truth of this run is dramatic enough on its own. I almost had a heart attack, probably experiencing post-World Cup depression, but it needs no exaggeration from me. Let me first place this in its proper historical context. Again, I don't think that we say this often enough on this show. Friends of the Congo, maybe we do. In 1974, Zaire became the first Black African nation, the first sub-Saharan African nation to ever qualify for a World Cup. The team lost all 3 of its group matches without scoring a single goal and actually conceded 14 goals. And it was remembered as the most bizarre moment of confusion during Brazil match for anything the team itself accomplished on this pitch for 52 years. 52 years. That was the entirety of our World Cup history. One appearance, a single one, 0 point, a footnote in FIFA's records book. Every Congolese person who has followed these sports inherited that absence as part of our national story. The sense that we belonged to World Cup history only as its opening chapter, never its continuation. So the Group K plus placed us alongside Portugal, Uzbekistan, and Colombia, arguably the toughest possible draw for a nation making its first World Cup appearance in 52 years. That's my personal opinion. And we had to go through that by, I'm sorry, but defeating Nigeria. Shout out to my Nigerian brothers and sisters, and defeating Cameroon, and then defeating Jamaica in Guadalajara in Mexico. So we opened the World Cup on June 17th against Portugal, Cristiano Ronaldo's Portugal. That is the sixth World Cup. The oldest outfield player ever to start a World Cup match at 41 years and 132 days old. Portugal went ahead in the 6th minute. I don't know. I had a blank. I don't know what happened. I was like, wait, is that a goal? Like, did he really score? Confused. Might have cursed few word out. But then at the stoppage time in the first half, Yuan Wisa rose to head home across from Arthur Maswaku. Yuan Wisa, Kovo National. Our national bald man. That goal was DR Congo's first ever World Cup point. A 1-1 draw against one of the most storied programs in the sport's history. I don't know how you celebrated. I celebrated. I was happy when we scored that goal. I was even happier about the point, because then it was clear that we had a chance. One win is all we needed. Then came Colombia, a tougher night. And one of my friends, Arnold, he's been watching all the games. He was like, we're going to lose against Colombia because the intensity of Colombia players are 10 times those of Portugal. And I just don't think that our defense will hold. Daniel Munoz scored the only goal of the match in the 76th minute, and we lost 1-0. That result left us, I will say, in a, again, precarious position. 1 point from 2 matches, 2 games, needing not just any result against Uzbekistan, but a win specifically, combined with results elsewhere. And that's when sometimes we talk about calculator in our culture. And then with my friends, we were always like, okay, what happened if Sweden lose? What happened if Cape Verde doesn't come up second and they are third? What happened if this team? And we were like, oh my God, this is headache. Colombia, for what it's worth, though, went on to secure the top spot in the group after drawing with Portugal. While Portugal advanced as the runners-up on the strength of a dominant win over Uzbekistan, I think they won like 5-0 that game. So that left Uzbekistan and ourselves fighting. Uzbekistan was already out. 2 games minus 7. They were already out. But for the Congo, it was about surviving. For the Congo, it was about dignity. We had to face Uzbekistan. We had to win against Uzbekistan. We only needed that point. We already knew what was going on. We only needed a win. It didn't matter how. It did not matter how. That left us needing a win against Uzbekistan on June 27th in Atlanta, with our tournament life on the line. And what happened in that match is a kind of a night you tell your grandchildren about. I was there. Thousands of other Congolese folks were there too. And those who couldn't make it for a situation that I will be speaking revolving the ticket situations. Not on this show, but in our next show. Watch the games from fan zones. It was historic. It was beautiful. It was magical. We went behind early. A mix up at the back, I would say, let Eldor Shomurodov chip a goalkeeper. Our goalkeeper, Lionel Passy. But the team did not fold. Risa equalized from the penalty spot after being fouled. That was our second goal. And then 100 million people started believing again, hoping. A few minutes later, Fiston Mayele put us ahead with a poacher's finish after a deflection fell into his path. And Wisa completed his own, I would say, hat trick of contribution with a brilliant low strike from 20 yards to make it 3-1. He actually scored a brace. I think it's that goal, his third goal of the tournament, was the second and the third was magical because I said that we only needed to win. But they gave us also the manner, the way to win it. We won 3-1, and that win sent the Democratic Republic of the Congo through the knockout stage as one of the best third finishers in the entire competition. Before the game, we were sitting at the bottom among like UNIT's 8 top 3. The Congo was sitting at the bottom. We were not even making it. But after that game, les premiers seront les derniers seront les premiers. After that game, we became first, the best third. Sit with that for a moment. We had to go through that competition through the back door in Jamaica. 52 years after Zaire's only previous World Cup appearance, a single tournament in 1974 that ended without a single point, without a single goal. 14 goals conceded. This generation of Congolese footballers, soccer players, did not just show up. They were not just there to participate. Yes, we were joking and said that we're Congolese. We're just there for the vibe. We don't care about the competition. We're not going to win it. We're just to have fun. And we were there to just have fun. But then we tied up against Portugal. Then it took us 60 minutes before folding against Colombia with the wall of Mpassi, another Lionel. Not Messi, but this time Mpassi. And then that win, 3-1 against Uzbekistan. For the first time in the history of this nation, the Congo reached the knockout rounds of a FIFA World Cup. I had goosebumps that night. I still could not believe it. And I said in earlier in an earlier episode that Congolese people travel across this continent in numbers. They travel across states in numbers. That surprised even seasoned World Cup observers. Who didn't know about the Congo, about Congolese people? And what I also noticed was the unity behind it. How Congolese folks came from everywhere, from Europe, from different states in the US. They put politics aside and they were supporting the nation. They refused to be distracted by men and women who are thirsty of power and using soccer, using the performance of the Leopard as a way to propose themselves into seeking the third terms. They were focused in supporting a team, one nation. They book flights, vacation days spent, family crossing state and provincial lines, and to be physically present, even though they couldn't make it to the stadium. They were there. I couldn't make it to the first game. The tickets were expensive, even for me. But I wanted to be there to celebrate with my fellow Congolese folks. But that Uzbekistan match in particular, the atmosphere in the stadium, the atmosphere outside the stadium, before the game, during the game, after the game, is the one I keep hearing about from people who were watching us from far away, watching us in the stadium as outsiders in Atlanta that night. The description I keep hearing from multiple independent sources in our community is the same: a building that for 90 minutes sounded and felt like it had been relocating from Kinshasa itself. That game was at 3 a.m., I believe, 2 or 3 a.m. in Kinshasa time. That is not incidental to the results. Players from this generation have spoken openly about how much that kind of vocal, overwhelming diaspora presence means to them on the pitch, particularly playing, I would say, an ocean, like a sea, ocean away from home. Then, unfortunately, because we were third, the draw gave us England in the round of 32 on July 1st, back in Atlanta. I had to be there, so I came back and we led for 70 minutes. 75th or 78th minutes. At the 78th minute, that's when they equalized. But what was really remarkable is that it's England. They're number 4 or 5th in the FIFA ranking, and we're like, what, number 40? Don't remember the ranking. But minute 7 into the match, DR Congo scored its first goal of the game. We score our first knockout round goal against one of the most decorated squad remaining in this tournament. For most of the first half, though, this team looked like it belonged exactly where it had earned the right to be. We played very well. But Harry Kane, man. Harry Kane, a man with more World Cup pedigree than almost any player alive, scored twice in the second half. His 12 and 13 World Cup goals across his career. And England came from behind to win 2-1. So England advances to face Mexico. I don't know about you, but I'm going to be Mexican in the next round. They showed countless times that they supported Congo, that they rooted for Congo. I had my Mexican friends messaging me and saying that they were supporting me from Guadalajara, from Mexico, from Oregon, from everyone on social media. So I'm going to be Mexican. I'm going to support England. No, I'm not going to support England. I will support Mexico. So for the Congolese people, unfortunately, Muisa said, man, I'm going to tell my kids about that game. Yes, we have to. And Hurricane got nothing on us. It was lucky chance. It was. I think our players were just tired. But what meant to be always happened. It was just not meant to be. So for the Congo, the tournament ends there. It ends in a round we had never been before it. A round that we have never been before. A round that we have never reached before. And I want to be honest, Gabriele Belli said exactly, yes. And I want to be honest about the sting of that result, because pretending it didn't hurt would be dishonest. It hurt. Because again, we came as dreamers to just have fun. And then we started believing that, wait, we have a chance. We can win. Because at the end of the day, it's 11 players versus 11 players. They all have 2 feet. We have 2 feet. They play ball, we play ball. So knowing that we lost when we had the potential or the opportunity to win hurt. So losing to England in the round of 32 after leading the most of the first half, that is not failure. That is a team in its first ever World Cup knockout appearance, making one of the tournament's traditional heavyweight sweat for the better part of the 80 minutes. I would say 78 minutes. And I think about what that 7th minutes lead against England must have felt like inside Atlanta Stadium. I was there. I felt it. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was like, wait, wake me up. This is not true. Is he offside? Shoot, it's a goal. I could not believe what I was witnessing. By every account reaching me was thick with Congolese flags, and people say, oh my God, y'all scored. I would show the messages that I got. I was so overwhelmed. I couldn't process what was happening. Congolese chants, families who had flown from Houston, Toronto, Brussels, France, Seattle, Boston, Oregon representing. Every corner of this diaspora to be inside that building for exactly that moment. For 70 minutes and beyond, this nation was ahead of England. I don't care. To me, we won 1-0. The game stopped at 75th minutes. At the 75th minutes, that's the picture that I captured. That's the picture that I'm going to be showing. We were leading almighty colonizer England. And I don't think that that sentence has ever been written in the history of Congolese football before this summer. And I don't want it to pass by without being said plainly once on this program. And I have to close the segment with Michel Kuka Muladinga, our Lumumba Via, that was essentially silenced. He was the fan that the world came to recognize for his motionless tribute to Patrice Lumumba during the AFCON. In the stand in every single DR Congo match, he was denied visa in the United States. He missed the must-win match against Uzbekistan entirely. The very match that sent this team into the history books. For political reason, I want to go ahead and say it. They denied him visa. See that fact next to everything we discussed in the news recap today about visibility, about who gets to be seen on the world stage, and about who gets turned away at the door, even from their own nation's most historic sporting night. That to me is the whole contradiction of this World Cup in a single image. A country producing history on the pitch and a system that could not find room for the one fan whose quietly tribute embodied exactly what this run meant to us. He didn't say the US assassinated Lumumba. He was not saying that. He didn't say Belgium assassinated Lumumba. He didn't say that. All he did was to stay quiet, dressed as Lumumba. But why was that frightening to them? So here's what I want to announce in this show. And I mean this with full seriousness of purpose. The World Cup was not simply watched by Congolese people from a distance. And again, I was personally there. It was lived in person by advocates, by social justice advocates, by influencers, by regular folks, Congolese folks, born in the US, from Congolese parents still attached to the Congo, born in the Congo, grew up in the US, came in the US a few years ago, months ago, decades ago. It was lived in person by people who traveled across this continent to be inside those stadiums. It was lived by Congolese entrepreneurs who built businesses, hospitality, travel logistics, community organizing, around getting our people to those games without waiting for any government ministry to do the organizing for them. People who are starting a business, own a business, and want to continue to connect Congolese people with one another. People owning podcasts, people wanting to build a better Congo with Congolese people. Their perspective on this tournament is not a footnote to my analysis. In many respects, it is more valuable than my analysis because they're on the ground too. They're on the ground as well doing the work. Doing the work I could only report on from a distance. So starting with the conversation I'm going to record with a bunch of them. Shout out to Liz from I Am African podcast that will be joining us. Shout out to Micheline Moïsa that will be joining us. Shout out to Merveille that will also be joining us. And I'm also expecting more. FM Josuel. So many people. Congo America will also be here to speak about their experience at this World Cup from a Congolese perspective. So, and for those who feel like they have a lot to share, I'm formally opening Congo Unfiltered's floor to these voices directly and those that I haven't mentioned. Advocates who show up from in Houston, Atlanta, Guadalajara, from the DMV area, from Boston, from Seattle, from California, business owners will build something real around this moment. Fans will organize their own communities without permission or support. I have brought you the analysis for months. Gabriela Belli said, Mon papa vient du Congo. I dreamed of the day of seeing Congo in the World Cup and rooted for Congo above everyone else. I'm so proud. Yes. Still, Gabriela colonizing everyone to face the violence they have perpetrated. Yes. So I've brought you the analysis for the months. Now I want to bring you the people who lived it, unfiltered, in their own words, on their own terms. And if that is you, if you traveled for this tournament, if you built something around it, if you want to build something around it, if you have simply been showing up for this country in ways that deserve recognition, you can reach out to Friends of the Congo. I am building a rotation of this conversation over the coming weeks, and I want this platform to reflect the full range of what Congolese people actually did with this historic moment. Not only what I alone observed from behind the desk or in the stadium, but what you have experienced. And this is consistent with everything this show has stood for since its first episode. We are called Friends of the Congo for a reason. So, Friends of the Congo and the Free Congo campaign have never been about a single voice narrating our story to the world. Never. They have been about building the infrastructure for Congolese people to narrate their story themselves in their own words, with their own evidence. And this World Cup gave us a rare opportunity, a rare moment when the world was actually watching. And I intend to make sure that attention gets redirected toward the people who earned it, to their own efforts, not concentrated on the one person sitting behind this mic, me. So if that's you, besides the guests that I already mentioned, and you are eager to also share your experience, please reach out to us. And that is where we stand today. Almost 2 hours. Jeez, I speak a lot, but that's where we stand. A world court case that could take years to resolve, but has already reshaped the legal record. A Lumumba contesting Kigali for the leadership of the Francophonie. A fourth round of sanctions landing on Rwandan gold while the gold keeps moving regardless. A president in Kinshasa maneuvering toward a third term using the exact playbook his convicted predecessor used before him. A UN Security Council presidency being used to press for a global mineral governance standard. An Ebola outbreak with no vaccine spreading through provinces already broken by war. A football team that gave us, for the first time in 52 years, a reason to watch a World Cup knockout match with our hearts in our thoughts. None of this exists apart from the rest of it. And that has always been the premise of this program, the premise of Congo Unfiltered, and he will remain so. A war fought over minerals cannot be separated from a court case fought over the same war. A president's constitutional maneuvering cannot be separated from the American minerals interests he uses to justify it. And a football team's historic run cannot be separated from the diaspora infrastructure. The flights booked, the vacation days spent. I've been negative in my PTOs, y'all. I have no more PTOs. So if we had made it, I don't know what I would have done. But that diaspora infrastructure, that risk it all. The advocate, the business owner, the entrepreneurs, the regular Congolese folks, the common Congolese people who made that presence in that stand, in the stands possible, in the stadium possible, any more than it can be separated from the visa denied to the one fan who tribute embodied what the whole run meant. Again, accountability is not a limited resource. I will hold Kigali to account for what he has done to our East, to our country. I will hold Kinshasa to account for what he's doing to our constitution, to our people. And I will hold every institution, FIFA, FECOFA, the sport ministry, Washington, Kigali, and Kinshasa, alike, that had a chance to honor these World Cup moments and failed to fully seize it. All of these positions stand together at the same time without contradiction. That has been true since the first episode of this program. And then again, It will remain true for as long as I sit behind this desk. So to every Congolese person watching today who traveled for these tournaments, for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, who organized a watch party, wherever you are, who explained to a coworker what for the first time, why DRC and Congo and Zaire all refer to the same nation. I have a headache when I had to do that exercise. To the people who use this summer's joy as an opening talk or conversation about the war in the Congo, about the refugee crisis, the humanitarian crisis, to someone who had never once considered it. For those who seize the opportunity to build something that will connect and unify folks, Congolese folks. You did the work. This platform exists to amplify. So I see you. I commend you. And starting this weekend, this next weekend, I intend to make sure that this show reflects your voice directly, not only mine. So I'm Gaetan Dufanzo, and this has been Congo Unfiltered. Beyond the headlines, and until next time, when I will be sitting, or when I will not be sitting here alone, I'll be sitting with one of you. Peace out.
I wanna take you somewhere, so you know I care. But it's so cold and I don't know where. I bought you daffodils and a pretty string, but they won't flower like they did last spring.